That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion. It's basically like that for me right now. Okay. Hey, if anybody's here live, please put a little comment in the box. You can write just, hey, Brett, don't sing again, something like that. We don't want to hear you sing, that's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion. And anyway, I hope the live stream's working. Oh, I just wrestled through some technical difficulties. Dawn, you're first in the stream once again. Thank you. Dawn, Aurora, the rising sun. May this be first. But I want to speak a little bit today about the first moon, which here in Hawaii they call the Hilo moon. And I want to talk about terrible lighting and very importantly about the painful global condition that I call starvation. So first, look, I want to honor and just be respectful because there are many people who are hungry right now, and I'm not one of them, and I'm not speaking about those in need of food, and I certainly honor that as one of the most painful and important truths of our reality. All right. But I'm wanting to talk with you also about a truth that is kind of unknown, it would seem, that I call starvation, which means being disconnected from the heavens, from the living sky. And for those of us who reside in the urban environment, this tends to be something that we are sick with and typically not even aware of. I heard a theory once that one of the reasons why the bees are dying off is because they can't connect with the stars like they once did. And while I have no idea if there's any truth to that, um, I believe it, right? I know it's true for this bee. And I've got to say, we rented an Airbnb here in Hawaii. We're on Maui for 5 nights. Blessed, privileged, so much gratitude. And I think if I can figure out the ones and O's here, maybe some twos and even threes, show you some photos, some unedited photos from my journey to the lava fields last night. Um, it's just the sky as it should be. But anyway, in this place where we're staying, and it's a nice place. It's just these green fluorescent bright lights everywhere, which is just so gross, you know, especially in a place that's like separated from the urban light pollution as I'm used to it living in the Bay Area of California. I mean, fortunately, we live like a little ways out, so our sky's a tiny bit darker than it is like down the road in Berkeley or something like this. Um, well, I'm just reading from Terrarian Librarian. What an amazing name. um, the bees play such a significant role in the novel The Starless Sea. Ooh, tell me more. Okay, let me find some pictures for you. Um, yeah, anyway, there's this painful thing here in the islands, right? And something that fortunately has been much disputed to some effect by locals in recent years and decades, which is that, you know, astronomers of our day and age put these gigantic telescopes on top of the top of the mountains, on top of the mountains, And I mean, these are sacred places. I mean, this is true here in Maui, Haleakala, right? Is 12,000 feet up above the ground. Is that true? No, 10,023 at its peak. And there's just tons of telescopes up there. And look, I appreciate cosmology and astronomy and these beautiful images of Orion's nebula and these, and I understand how being on solid ground, high above the sea in thin atmosphere, and away from like the urban sprawls of the mainland is ideal for telescopes. You know what? There's lots of uninhabited islands where that can go down. Maybe not at such a high elevation, but there's plenty of places to do this, right? It's just like reeks of the lack of respect for indigenous wisdom traditions, for the Aina, for the land, right? So I've actually been asked a bunch of times, like, which side am I on in regards to telescopes on the sacred mountains or the people who feel mountains are sacred? Obviously, the latter. Are you serious? I'd be okay with no telescope in the world if the sacred spaces could be preserved and respected. And if we could learn to walk in a way where we honored sacred space. But I'd rather have both. And there's plenty of places a telescope could go. So anyway, when you go up to Haleakala, like there's all of these gigantic domes, right? And I mean, some aren't even employed anymore, right? They'll be done with them. They don't even take them down. And so Haleakala, the House of the Sun here, right? The principal, or I should just say the tallest volcano, because on Maui, right, there's the so-called West Maui Mountains, which is Halimahina, the House of the Moon, and then there's Haleakala, right, in the east. Um, and they were both volcanic. So anyway, at Mauna Kea, I mean, this is where there's been strong movement on Hawaii, which you may know as the Big Island. That's how they sell it these days, but that island was called Hawaii, right? And Mauna Kea is much taller, even almost 14,000 feet, right? The tallest mountain on Earth from foot to head, because its foot is in the sea. You know what I mean? Like when you're going up to Everest's peak, like you're starting already pretty high up in the mountains before you climb. Yeah. So Mauna Kea, I mean, it holds that truth, and it holds so much everything for the people here, and it should. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up, because I know it's like hard on the heart, um, is that there's a ironic benefit to having like Keck and other telescopes, like some of the most famous, expensive, land-based telescopes in the world at the peak of Mauna Kea, or I should say near the peak. Those telescopes are actually not even at the peak, right? Um, there's this ironic benefit, which is that Hawaii Island is like a dark sky place. And so all of the street lights are like low level LEDs pointing downward. And there are ordinances about how bright your lights can be at your house, right? And so if you get around Hawaii, and so you may know this is the Big Island, like it is a dark sky space. Now there's like 7,000 climates on that island. This is true here in Maui as well. It's amazing on Hawaii to just kind of like circumambulate that island. And you can move from like, I mean, literally snowy zones at time up at Mauna Kea, but just like through dry spaces and wet spaces, right? The volcano, it's just amazing. But one thing that's pretty common, unless you're in the super resort area, and even there, because of this ironic benefit of telescope astronomers having their gigantic, expensive scopes on the sacred mountain, is that it's a dark sky space. Like Maui, not so much, and much less so than it was 10 years ago. And for these places, like I'm staying, look, I'm like literally participating with the thing that I'm complaining about right now. Is that now there's irony, right? because people just come to the island, stay for 5 nights and split, right? And so there's all of these like Airbnbs where nobody calls home, right? They're just turned over to sign on to the internet. I'm on some like company's interface earlier, right? So I shouldn't complain, especially when, I'm part of the thing that I'm complaining about, but they don't care about lights, right? They want you as some visiting haole, which means someone without breath, um, to just feel like you're at home. So light it up, y'all, right? Okay. Anyway, you didn't come here to hear me complain. I just want to honor this and like whisper to the heart of all souls. Starvation is a very real thing. Like many, many, many beings in our world will never see the band of the Milky Way. Because Anna and I were out looking at the Scorpion and the Archer this morning once I got back from my mission, and I'm like, see? And actually, this morning, not so much because the sun was beginning to rise when we stepped outside. But she came and did my morning sky work with me a few days ago near where we live, and I was pointing out the tail of the Scorpion and the arrow of the Archer, and said like, "Hey, this is where Galactic Center lives," right? And it's an amazing truth. Like, if you know that, you can tune in to Galactic Center at any time. Um, Let me actually show you an image. Where's buttons? So this was last night in a completely unedited thing. Can I go full screen with this? You can. Okay, hopefully you should still see this on your screen. I'm going to put my face away. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to have to kind of trace a constellation for you here. But what you can certainly see without assistance is volcanic rock lava, right? This is the sharp stuff. So I'm walking quite gingerly out there last night and with a flashlight and such. Um, and so I was just kind of sitting out here on the ancient lava fields for a few hours last night and really connecting to the sky, right, in the moment, and then also connecting to parts of the sky that I know like hosted different, well, planets and houses at the time of my birth, and just kind of realigning and connecting in prayer with each, and kind of laughing at myself as I went from one to the next because things were so literal. Okay, so when I'm out in California or wherever, like anywhere for the most part, I'm teaching people to look to the stinger of the scorpion, which I'm circling on the screen here. Let me move this thing. I'm circling on the screen 2 stars. That's Shaola in the south. So let me trace the scorpion for you. The way it's drawn these days, like this is kind of the front of the scorpion. Really would be like the scorpion's mouth, and the claws are super long. This is the heart of the scorpion, Antares, that I'm circling. Hopefully you see my mouse making circles. I can't see the chat right now if you're telling me yes or no, but hopefully you can see the heart and the arteries. Okay. And then the scorpion comes way down here, and then these 2 stars are the tail stars, Shala and the Sa. Here, this is known as Maui's fishhook. The way it rises, it literally just rises like the fishhook, like the necklace that you see so often. But it's the hook that Maui used to fish the islands from the sea. And then Archer stars, this is like the arrow tip, Anase, of the Archer constellation. And you'll hear me say Archer and Scorpion rather than Sagittarius and Scorpio, because signs, Sagittarius and Scorpio, and constellations, Archer and Scorpion, are very different things. Okay. Anyway, the center of our galaxy lives here. Hopefully you can see the mouth of the serpent, right? This is the serpent's head, the great galactic cosmic serpent, where it bites its own tail. It's just the Ouroboros, yes? And this is at the center of our galaxy. Like we're literally looking into the center of the Milky Way when we look this way. And so typically, like I'm pointing out the tail of the scorpion and the arrow of the archer, which are much easier to see. And you can't see any of the Milky Way band, right? Because I'm doing this in places of just absolute starvation. But here, it's like it's hard to see the stars. And there's a trick that we use. So, like photos I'll be posting over time and sharing at Constellations, which is, by the way, the new membership group at the School of Astrology. If you haven't heard me talking about it yet, come check it out, geminibrett.com/constellations. Or there's a link there to just hit the community link at geminibrett.com if you'd like to learn more. Many of you have already aligned your star with ours, and I'm excited to share some cool news about what will be happening this week. Yeah, anyway, it's amazing to me that at home, it's like, okay, I have to just know where the galactic center is. I could follow the stinger of the scorpion, the arrow of the archer, and it's kind of align my heart there. It's just the foot of Ophiuchus. I was recently corrected. Thank you. Ophiuchus, scorpion, archer, they triangulate the center of the galaxy, right? And I can just align my heart there, share my prayers, whatever, right? But out here, if I get away, like I had to get in the car and drive last night. We went to bed. I woke up. It was 1 something a.m. I looked at the weather and saw that there's going to be a bunch of clouds for the other days that we're here, at least forecasted. I trust those guys as much as I trust the astrologers. Anyway, and I was like, we better get out, right? So went out and had an amazing night out there. And I'm a bit tired, but I'm excited for family time. I think I'll share a little bit more about some of the experience on the way out there, on the way back. But anyway, so out there, it's like I'm recording some video, and it's like, how do I even point out the scorpion when it's just a river full of stars, right? Well, there's camera tricks we can play. But it's amazing. It's like instead of me using the constellations to show where the galactic center is, like using galactic center to show where the constellations are. That's good stuff. All right, let's see. Hopefully this is still on your screen. Looks like it. Let me stop my video again. So here's the center of the galaxy. Again, the cosmic serpent biting its own tail. This is the scorpion, these 3 stars here. These days are kind of drawn as the front of the scorpion, and they've compressed its claws. It used to be shown holding the scales, but no longer. The heart of the scorpion, Antares. And this star is sacred for all of us. This is a royal star, one of the 4. One of the markers of the heavens, and traditionally actually associated with the direct, well, I shouldn't say traditionally, but in some sacred systems associated with the cardinal direction west. This star was actually setting when I was born. It had just set. It's my setting star. I was born with 10 degrees Gemini rising. And in our day and age, the heart of the scorpion projects to 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius. Yes, signs and constellations are very different things. So this is a star for me that I know to be a marker of my 7th house of relationship, which kind of spans from here to here. And I think I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So the stinger here, right? Maui's fishhook. And then this is the arrow of the archer. I'm going to actually play this through time real quick, and then we'll come back to that. This is about an hour of the spinning earth. Or let's just share as earthlings. This is about an hour of the spinning sky. And what direction am I looking? And what the heck were those things that just flew by? let's just watch that a few times. So I just want to pose this to you. What direction is the camera facing? Clouds of heaven, that's the Milky Way band. Clouds of earth is what this should be called. I think I should share that my naked eye does not see the Milky Way band this pronounced. I definitely see it. It's definitely as loud as the constellations for me when I'm out here away from the lights as I was in this ancient lava field that lives west of Haleakala. This is, if you know Maui, this is like the lava field down by like McKenna. Amazing. Okay, and so you'll notice that it's coming up, right? So I'm looking east. And I'm not looking exactly east, I'm looking southeast. I'm looking somewhere between the rise of the eastern sky and the reach of the southern sky. You start watching the sky and you start learning more about how Earth works. And these are the things that sadly are just lost in this global dis-ease of starvation. I'm going to rewind this a little bit so I can point out a couple other stars for you. Let's see the right. It's hard because of the clouds. There's a good one. Okay. So you can still see the Milky Way band here, right? I'm just going to circle some stars and I'll show you, instead of the Archer constellation, I'll show you an asterism within that constellation that we call the teapot. So this is like the top of the teapot's lid, which I'm tracing here, this triangle. And then the body of the teapot is like this trapezoid here. And then you can see the handle here, right? And then the spout, which pours out the steam of the Milky Way. There's a good one. So teapot and the steam, beautiful, right? This is part of the Archer constellation. This is Nunki, which Daniel Germario taught me. And he's taught me so much about the sky, but that this is like the stars, the oldest name of a star that we use. It goes all the way back to Sumeria. I should say that we use in the West, probably here on the island. Folks are aware of like older star names than that. Anyway, so this is Nunki. And it's in our day and age about 12.5 degrees tropical Capricorn. It's like back here, which is often shown as kind of the cape of the Archer, where I have a star that starts my 9th house. So my personal, when I was born, my 7th house runs like, well, let me show you this in a very different way. I'll show you a project I'm currently working on for my school. This is going to be a super duper helpful thing to have out there. Sadly, there's very few like astronomy apps that let us track celestial longitude, which is what you need if you want to convert to the tropical zodiac degrees. You know, fun retort when the rationalist astronomer comes at you and says your astrology's nonsense because the signs and constellations don't align. You just say, hey, where do you measure, what point in the heavens do you measure celestial longitude from? What point in the heavens do you measure right ascension from? And by the way, they're the same point. They don't really have a name for it. They might call it the vernal point, which is very northern hemispheric. But what it is 0 tropical Aries, right? So it's like, oh, hey, we're configuring a whole zodiac to that point. And there's a very important reason why. Which point of the heavens is directly above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn? And they probably don't know. But the answer, by the way, is 0 degrees tropical Capricorn, which is here. So this band, this golden band here, this is the ecliptic, the path of the sun, the heart of the zodiac, okay? And so now you can see Antares here at 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius. Well, as I said before, like I was born 10 Gemini rising. So for me personally, I associate with this star as my setting star and therefore like the gateway into relationship. If I was using like an equal house system, then with 30 degrees for every house, so I could go either the whole sign, like all of Sagittarius being my 7th sign, and I know that that today in our day and age hosts the celestial Scorpion, or I could go from like 10 Sag to 10 Gemini. These small lines, by the way, are the decans, the faces, the 10-degree divisions of the zodiac. And for those of you in constellations, hopefully you've gotten to play with some of my backyard astronomy videos that the decans walk, right? We're kind of like tuning into these faces in a very different way. Anyway, but I might look at like a Placidus house system, for example. And it was last night, and in my Placidus houses, the seventh house runs from 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius to like 2 degrees tropical Capricorn. And so knowing that Al Nasil is at 1.5 tropical Capricorn in our day and age, and look, I've lived 48 years. These are the alignments for 2025. This changes with precession. I'm now 2/3 of a degree old. Damn. Because it takes 72 years for each degree of the zodiac to precess or march backwards through the constellations, or I could say the stars process like 1 degree every 72 years. And so like Antares is now at 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius. When I was born, it was like 2/3 of a degree shy of this position, 9 something. Well, I was also born 936 Sagittarius setting. So anyway, I just know that it's my setting star. And if I use like Placidus houses, for example, I use many, then my personal 7th house runs from Antares to Al Nasil. Bam. Hey, if somebody could help me pronounce this better, please do. Right? I should take a class in Arabic so I can pronounce some of these star names. All right, in the Placidus houses, my 8th house runs from 2 Capricorn to 22 Capricorn, right? And so I don't have a star marked for that zone. But it's basically here at the ass of the centaur, right? And then I know this star here that I'm circling in the lower left of the screen, if you can see it, this is, some call it dorsum, in the center of the sea goat. That star was at the midheaven when I was born. So that my 9th house is kind of like this zone, in like a Placidus house system. And again, I use many. But it can be really helpful, like if you have, Venus at 7 degrees tropical Capricorn when you were born, like you should really get to know Caus Borealis, which is a beautiful, amazing star. That's the star at the top of the teapot. Can you see the teapot here? Right. Let's look at that in this other way. So I have to get out of this to do that. Right. So here's, where are we? It's amazing. Like I'm literally orienting to the heavens by working with Galactic Center. This is the teapot. I'm sure here's the triangle, the top of the teapot. This is Caus Borealis, Caus Medius, Caus Australis, right? And that's Caus Borealis, about 6 degrees tropical Capricorn in our day and age. So if you have a planet there in your natal chart, like it's a good star to get to know, to align your prayers to that star, right? So let me just share some of my own personal experience last night, if you're interested in hearing it. I'm driving out and I see Lydia wrote, did anyone else see a shooting star? That's an awesome question. I saw many out there, and actually I'll share, well, I'll get to that. What you saw in the time lapse would be more like satellites, planes, and UFOs. Because that time lapse we were just watching, it's taking a photograph like every 10 seconds, took like 500 of them and put them together, right? So a shooting star happens too fast for that to show up in a time lapse. Does that make sense? Right. So I'm driving out there last night, and it's like it's a windy road, and a lot of folks kind of camp out there. And so I'm just trying to be careful with the headlights and not have my brights on the whole time, like not to be that problem I was just complaining about entirely. But I'm also driving very slowly and carefully and listening to some beautiful music and opening the heart and whispering some intentions as I go out towards the temple of the sky. And little kitty runs across the road. Do you know what I mean? And like this cat, it's obviously just like playing, because I'm the only car out there, like probably for an hour. I don't know, at least for 10 minutes. And there's no reason why this cat would wait for the car to run out in front of, right? Like I think it's fun for cat. And I get it if you know that's my feeling anyway. So anyway, cat ran across. I'm like, okay, like I need to be really alert. I was already. I saw him coming. I was with cat. Um, then it was deer and three deer. Now I see three deer a lot. I'm guessing three deer is the most common quantity of deer in a deer sighting. I'm not sure if that's true. The assumption is like mom and two babies or two children is like a very common sight. But I was also born in like in some calendar traditions, like in the Mayan calendar, as they call it these days, on a day called deer and a day called three deer. So maybe it's something that I just scheduled to see more than others. I don't know. I've also lived in a lot of deer places, and deer is so important, right? They call us back to the woods. They remind us that we are earth beings, you know? In the Mayan system, right? Like there weren't horses there. And I'm saying Mayan, I need to be careful, really. Like even the word Mesoamerican would be inappropriate, but I'm going to use it because many calendrical systems there, and actually even in the Southwest of the United States, as we know it today, as we believe, these sacred calendrical systems of the 260-day count were actually utilized. So this was true for the Mexica and the people at Teotihuacan, whose names we do not know, the Yucatec and other, the Quiche, other Mayans, as we call them today. Do you know they weren't actually called Mayans? They're named after a site called Mayapan. Um, the Olmec, the Toltec, right? This 260-day count. So anyway, in that count, depending on if you start at sunrise or sunset, and there's some debate, or maybe there's years that should start at midnight or midday. And I don't think today's the day for us to go into that sacred space. But typically it's shown when I look at my, Gregorian birthday that I was born on the day of three Kesh or three Manik, which means three deer. And the deer there, right, there's no horse until the Spaniards came. So the deer is typically taught more like horses taught in some other traditions. But for me, deer personally, like in my heart, deer is this tender, majestic force that calls us in. When Anna and I first saw the house where we lived and were considering putting in a bid, we obviously saw it during the day, but I came back after hours and I watched a sunset from behind the house. And then I went to the closest hiking trail where I take my dog Isabel almost daily. And thank you, Omar. Omar's probably hiking Isabel right now. And I went up there and there was just literally cartoon style stag in the moonlight, like silhouette of a stag against the moon. I mean, it was, and then as I'm walking down from that, like, damn, I just got stag in the moonlight. Then the owl flew right by my head and I was like, this is the place, obviously, right? First time, well, I first met Anna here on this island. Her son Koa was born on this island. I think the first time that Anna and I traveled here together, now partnered, just after we landed and we were driving away from the airport, owl, so sacred. Okay, so I see kitty cat, right? Then I see three deer, and I'm like, I always see three deer, and it's so special. It always reminds me. But then I saw four deer, and I don't typically see this where I live. Like usually you see the fellas hanging out with the fellas and the ladies hanging out with the ladies and the babies until the babies go and do their own thing. And sometimes that's like when one of the babies starts growing his horns and now he's hanging out with the fellas. Do you see what I'm saying? Um, but here I saw like what was clearly a family unit of deer. And there was stag and there was doe and there were two like little ones. And that just really opened my heart, right? Because as you've heard me say, Anna and I are having a baby. Scheduled arrival is in June, June 12. We shall see. And then there will be Anna and Koa and me and baby, right? So that really like lifted me up because we're on this thing that Anna describes as baby moon. And we've been talking about like, hey, Koa, like, next time we're on an airplane like this, there'll be a baby. And he's so smart. He's like, no. He's like, dude, we're gonna be on an airplane on Sunday. It's like, touche, sir, touche. But we were watching him last night. We were down seeing the sunset and the Hilo moon, which I do intend to speak about some here with you. Um, and wow, you could just he was just connecting in, he was doing his thing. Anna's sitting on the beach, hands in the sand. I'm like, you know, live streaming about the sacred nature of the sky. We're doing our own thing. And it was just so beautiful to see Koa like in silhouette against the sunset backdrop, like walking in the beach, contemplating. That's my experience of what he was up to. I was like, wow, next time we're here, he'll be like herding toddler, likely. What how am I to say? Um, so anyway, it was a beautiful thing to see. Nadine, I see 4 deer exclamation point. I'm wondering if that means that's your day sign. Okay. So the 4 deer really spoke to me. Then I saw 1 deer, one baby deer, one spotted baby just in the road all by itself, looking around like it has lost the fam. And that feeling right away. You're like, oh, I need to help, right? Um, and it's like, no, actually, nature knows. There's that great, Zen koan of like, if you walk by a cockroach struggling on its back, do you flip it over? And yeah, especially when I get my loud car out of there with its bright lights, mom's like, hey, Junior, do you know what I'm saying? Like, come over here, kid, right? So, like, I don't need to go help baby deer. I need to not hit baby deer, keep my eyes open. Okay, then I make it to my space and I was out. For a while, I was just like photographing on the road. When you're out here in this place past McKenna Beach in Hawaii, it's pretty dark skies. Like when you look to the north, um, then you see like the lights of the tourist place where I'm currently sitting. So again, part of the problem. Um, and it's I'm ironic many times a day. So I'm out here now, and in this space, like no cars are gonna come. There's not really that many places to park, but I find a spot and put the car there, and it's just spiky lava on both sides of the road. Like the real deal, if you fall, you will be gash stuff, right? And show my tiny little cut. Like I actually made it so I was just so present and careful, and using the tripod for a walking stick. This would be I almost brought gloves, and I was like, I'm not going to need gloves in Hawaii. Would be a great place for gloves, but long pants, shoes. You know what I mean? Like you want to be super respectful out there. They call it the like the sharp stuff, right? Amazingly, that name is often also employed for serious, because Sirius is like lava sharp like that, right? I'm scared. I'm not scared. I'm sorry to say I can't remember the name right now for smooth lava, which you can just lay on. It's like the best, and it like it is fire, so it just soaks up the sun during the day, and at night you can just lay on those like smooth lava beds and stargaze, and it's the best. In the stuff, it's like you must be very careful. There's not going to be a really comfortable place to sit. That's not the purpose of it. It's like its purpose is to offer some of that discomfort, to like remind you of the imperative of awareness, of vigilance, Anyway, in my experience of it. but we're all meant to have our own experience of bees and deers and running cats and sharp lava and the like. So I took a bunch of video for like my class right now, or for, I should say, for the community, and took some photos from like the safety of the road. And I was like, okay, let's take some breaths. Let's go like navigate the lava field. And I go out there and I sat where you just watch that time lapse from. I feel like I want to bring up at least one photo for you. Let me go find those on this photo card. I would have had some of this stuff prepared, but I came home and slept. Um, yeah, and so when I was out there, I was just, I'm just drinking it in. And a beautiful thing here, although I got to see this from the place where we are staying, and then some clouds came in, some low clouds on the ocean, so I was not able to take this with me out there. But you can see at certain times of the year, depending on where the sun is in the zodiac, you can see the Southern Cross right here in the Northern Hemisphere. The first time I saw the Southern Cross from the Northern Hemisphere and was aware of this was with some of you actually in Shishim in the Yucatan in Mexico. But yeah, here I'm at 21 degrees north of the equator. The Southern Cross is above the ground, right? So sometimes the sun is nearby, and so no Southern Cross for you. But at other times, like now, Southern Cross totally visible. So I was seeing it last night. I had to kind of like climb onto a, what do you call those, a lounge chair to get the tripod high enough to get like a pretty shaky photograph of the Southern Cross. Well, you know what? Maybe that's in here too. All right, let me quiet myself for a second so I can just open up. Um, How do I sort these things? A sec. What if I do that? Huh, frustrating. Hmm. Well, I don't know if this is going to happen, friends, because my computer is choosing its own way. So maybe I'll show those to you another time. I'm just gonna scroll around and see if I can find some individual characters. Wait, honestly though, why wouldn't you? Oh, or maybe I can. I'm just trying to sort them in such a way that if I sort them by size. Okay, let's try this. Sorry. I know you're just looking at me like looking at a computer. This is very bad television. 3:19. 6 a.m., 3 a.m. That's all Pacific time. Okay, now we're on point. Bunch of stuff's missing, but hopefully I'll be able to get some view here. No, sorry to say that the thing I'm looking for is actually can't be found. So let me just abandon that mission because that's really boring. Sorry. Thanks for bearing through that with me. Um, yeah, so part of what I'm up to when I'm out there is just like, wow, connecting to these places like I don't know. It's so cool. There's a star here called Canopus that I know is Carl. And yeah, I guess I'll share that story with you. I was once here in Maui at my friend Mary's uh, place in Haiku in the jungle, and I was sleeping out in her lanai. And I woke up in the middle of the night to a rooster cockadoodle doing, right? So, and right in front of me, because I'm in a covered lanai, which means like deck porch, right? So I have this like rectangle of star view, and there is the most beaming, bright, sharp star, right? Lava sharp. And so I'm like, that's Sirius. And I'm like, wait, that is not Sirius. Like that is a different, that's a different sound. It's a different experience, right? And too low, I think. So I got up and I went out, and indeed, then I saw Sirius up here. Who is this? And I had to get out the, thing. Um, After a while, because I always try to first just sit with the star and ask that star for its name. And in this case, it was pretty evident in Carl. So why Carl? Okay, because of this. So the star is Canopus, which is the second brightest star of our sky. It is a very southern star, so it can never be seen where I reside in California. Nadine, where you are in Baja California, you can see Canopus. Actually, where I grew up in Las Vegas, Canopus is just on the horizon, and I have seen it there since I was initiated into Canopus gazing here in Hawaii. So anyway, this night, I'm like, who are you? And then cock-a-doodle-doo, and another cock-a-doodle-doo. And so why Carl? Because it's not a great name for a rooster. Carl, because Carl Sagan. Because, Carl Sagan is the one from whom I learned that every star is a sun. And rooster cock-a-doodle-doos at sunrise, right? So if they're like cosmologically wise, as apparently the roosters on Maui are, you don't only cock-a-doodle-doo for the rising of that star of ours that we call sun. Every star is a sun, right? So cock-a-doodle-doos throughout the night. Carl Sagan roosters, right? And so I know that star is Carl. Anyway, I was connected with Carl last night. What's up, Carl? It's been a long time. It's been a long time. And actually, Anna was out with me, and I was like, wow. So Anna, like we were looking at this in California there, and I remember how low that was. Like all this stuff down below, we can't ever see. I was like, what is that? And then this is where sometimes the astronomy apps can really help. It's like, oh wow, like the sails of the boat Argo are just huge. And the IAU, the International Astronomical Union, in their infinite wisdom, has separated the great constellation Argo, right, which is very low or south in the Greek sky. What does that mean? On the Mediterranean, right? And so you would go set sail. Anyway, the IAU has now separated Argo into three constellations called the keel, the sails, and the poop deck. And I know which one's the sails. I'm not sure about the other two, but I was like, oh, wow, I never see these stars. I was like, wait, I see these stars all the time. They're like right behind Sirius. And then I was like, well, that must be the poop deck, right? Actually, when I was in DC, I was like following the gaze of the statue. Yes, I'm strange. And it took me to this park where I saw a statue of a man on a horse pointing back, and I was like, I'm in the right place. And then I saw a man pulling off a pretty interesting dog owner move. He had a bag in his hand to pick up the poo, but he didn't pick up the poo from the ground. He just caught it as the dog was producing. It was like, interesting. So I thought of that, right? So like, the sky speaks to us in our own language. And so I was like, well, that must be the poop deck. But I don't know that that's true. What I did definitely learn though is like, wow, a lot of the stars of Argo are actually visible where I live. And it's like this with constellations. First of all, stars are celestial, constellations are terrestrial. It's how the stars are apparently connected from our point of view. And by the way, we could connect the dots in any way of our choosing, and different cultures have connected them differently. Who is the IAU to say this is what's official? These are the boundaries, and something about Ophiuchus and whatever. But regardless, like once you meet several stars and then you learn to kind of connect the dots into these constellations, the stories of the sky just come more alive. You get to see how one connects to the next. And of course, the poop deck, right? It's right behind the big dog's butt. And so I'm excited to go back to California, not right away, but when I do in some days to like go see those stars in my local experience there. Okay. Well, I was going to speak some about the Hilo moon, and I'll just say one thing, which will be a little ranty, like where I began, but I want to share a little bit more of my experience last night. I'm going to take you into kind of a heavy place, if you will. Because, I mean, Anna and I have spoken about this a little bit and probably need to have something written, like neither of us have a will or whatever. And one of the things that we were really intently working with during the eclipse is to release any fears around problems with the baby's birth for the baby or for mama. There were miscarriages last year. And so that's, it's alive. And we were doing some work around that and some process. But still, and like sometimes preparing for the if actually keeps the if from coming around. Like if problems happened, right? Like, what about ownership of the house and the things? How do we make sure that Koa like is set up to receive, right? Like inheritance from mother, and maybe not even right away. Maybe there's a steward of a trust or whatever. It's not like we're rolling in cash over there, but whatever's left to make sure it's invested in such a way that can sort him out in the later ages, and that, right? So like we need to get some of that in place. As I'm like thinking of this as I'm staring at galactic center, and some of it I think inspired by watching Family Deers and then Baby Deer All Alone, right? And I wasn't like consciously connecting those dots into this painful constellation of my consideration, but it's what was happening for me. And then I was like, holy shit. And I was like, wait a second, that's my relationship star. Oh, I'm like staring into my 8th house right now as I'm like tripping on death. But I'm also, by the way, just tripping on the mysteries of it all, right? And so what I did is I turned to the right and I faced the stars that were in the 5th house when I was born, which run from the haunches of the lion to Spica, if you use Placidus houses, which I'm currently entertaining. So I looked to those stars of the 5th house, and it's beautiful asteroid, or shooting star, meteor, I should say, meteor, maybe asteroid, maybe part of a comet. Maybe Starlink falling to Earth. What if they all did? Anyway, so right through the stars of my 5th house with just like great joy. Every time I see a shooting star, I just instantly say thank you, and then try to sort out what went down. Do you know what I mean? So it was really like such a relief. And then it was cool because I was like, all right, like my 6th house stars over here. Like, let's look at some of my health stuff and just kind of speak to this place of the sky about it. Now, by the way, you can't ever look at the 6th house. Like 6th house is beneath the ground in the west, right? But the stars that were there when you were born every day will root and rise and reach and rest again, right? And so it was like that, like how the sky was arranged last night. My setting star was like up in the 11th house. And it kind of worked a lot like my relocated chart. In fact, maybe I can share this photo with you. Well, I know it's in my text messages because Anna sent me a text that she was awake. So let me see. Let me just do a little computer kung fu. No. Okay, well, I put it on my Facebook page. By the way, if you ever, I can't even get there. If you ever want to see my many places, thanks to Carolyn Link. What a, what a, what a wonderful last name for this particular share. There's a page that's geminibrett.com/links. Yeah. And that will take you to like a bunch of links. Let me see. What happens if the YouTube page isn't even here. Okay, well, I want to share this one photo with you. So let me just try to find it in a different way. And I'll share the tale with you as I was leaving, right? So I was out there hanging out while this time lapse was happening for an hour. And just contemplating and tripping on all these things. Some of them I described, some of them I have not. And as I'm walking out, so I get this text from Anna that they're awake. And I was like, sweet, I'm coming home. And it's going to take me a bit because I've got to navigate this like lava field. And I'll let you know when I'm in the car, right? Um, just as I'm walking back, right, I found this photo. Buttons here. I saw this. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at, by the way, like the mountain on the left, and that's just the very foot. That's Haleakala. That's the house of the sun, which is one of the kind of like sacred centers of a stargazing tradition from which I hail. Like one of the sacred places for Daniel Jamario was one of my first teachers of sky wisdom. And it's been a very sacred place and a very important place for me in my life. You live in Seattle, you better know how to get to Hawaii and find out how to afford it. Like that was like the big initiation for Seattle with me. Anyway, so I'm looking back just next to this plant. What do you see? Do you see these two beings right next to each other down the bottom center? Who's right next to each other right now on April 10th, 2024, if you're into that whole Gregorian trip? And the answer, my friends, are these fellas, Mars and Saturn. And let's push now. 2 arc minutes away, and obviously very close in latitude and declination as well, right? Like this is Mars on top and Saturn below. And it's such a trip because I'm seeing them as I'm like gingerly and very slowly and carefully and respectfully and in, like as best as I can in a grounded way, not to get grounded onto the sharp lava stuff, the Mars stuff, right? Like I'm out walking on fire spike, ancient Saturn, fire spike Mars, very carefully Saturn, so I don't get cut Mars, right? And I look back and there they are in Pisces, which means in the water bearer, rising on like the southeastern reach of Haleakala. It's just like, ah. Then I came home, said what's up to the fam and passed out for a little bit. And now here I am, and now it's family time. So I want to share one last thing. And gosh, I wish I had a photo with which I could do this. The Hilo moon. Hilo means first. So twice now, in the true Gemini way, I've been here trying to do my live stream today. There was some retrograde difficulties at first, and twice now, Dawn was the first to be like, "What's up?" Right? So dawn, first light, you know, before the light. Oh, here was a cool experience last night. I've been testing this idea of why the second house was called the gate of Hades in the Hellenistic tradition. And it's like, you know what? That's because that's when you start seeing sunlight. So you don't see sunlight. Well, I guess you do. The sky starts slowly brightening, like when the sun's not even in the first house, but in the second, right? It's gate of Hades, like so clear. So there's so much clear, literal, astronomical, well, I don't know about literal, but very clear astronomical transmission in the code of the ancient astrology, which is why I'm so much more and more drawn to the ancient wisdom of this craft. Okay. Where were we? Right. So Hilo moon. So I was telling Koa, we were talking about phases of the moon on a drive to his school. I think a couple of weeks ago, I live streamed about it at the time. I was really amazed by his natural way. And I was telling him about the Hilo moon, the first moon. I was like, we're going to be on Hawaii, like when there's the Hilo moon, right? So like literally yesterday, it was 2 days ago. He and I watched with eclipse glasses, we watched the new moon. Typically a new moon, a no moon, right? Moon is above or below the sun and therefore obscured from our view, hidden in the bright beams of the sun, yes? New moon is no moon. The true new moon in like the old calendar traditions typically is actually the first visible new moon, right? After the moon has survived her monthly trial by fire and she's reborn, and she has that sliver of a smile, like evidence that she's made it through, right? Diana's bow, we say. And so many traditions actually that keep the lunar phases, the months, for the months of their calendar, begin days at sunset. Why? Because that's where you see the first moon of the month. The sun sets, and there is the young moon, the sliver crescent, the maiden moon, you know, Diana's bow. She's firing arrows at the sun, you know. Last night, it was arranged in such a way, and it's true at this time of the year, because of the way that Aries sets, that Diana's bow was just perfectly like the horns of the moon, we also say. And by the way, think about like Hathor or other crescent crowns, right? That the horns of the moon were just perfectly vertical. She was just a perfect bowl. Though we could see her whole face, right? We could see the earth shine. So we see the sliver crescent of moon reflecting sun to earth. And then we see the rest of the moon slightly illuminated by earth shine, which is sun off of earth to the moon and back to earth. It's literally older than the crescent. Trip on that for a bit. So we see this beautiful just crescent bowl with Jupiter above. Actually, I saw Jupiter first. I knew the sun had just set, and unless the moon somewhere in between came down and just, you know, oh, Anna, can you see that? It took a while. But then, of course, as the sun sank further and further down beneath the ground into the sixth house, sky darkens, the smile of the moon brightens. And what a beautiful thing to behold. Okay, so there'll be much more to say about Hilo moon another time. Hilo, like in the Hawaiian system, they don't have 8 phases. They don't have 12, which is what I like to use to align the phases of the moon to the 12 whole sign aspects, or whole sign geometries, I should say. They have 30. They have a name for every day of the waxing and waning moons. And the first moon is Hilo. Discerning light, I see you asking here, Hilo is the side with the trade winds, right? Hilo means east. Why? Because they first receive sunrise. So Hilo, for example, you know, like the city of Hilo or the town of Hilo, where the University of Hawaii is on Hawaii, which you may know as Big Island, it's the easternmost point of the entire Hawaiian island chain. It's the place, well, really, you could climb up Mauna Kea and see sunrise first because of elevation. But Hilo, being the most eastern point of the Hawaiian Islands, first receives the rising sun. It is first. It first receives the rising moon. It's first to see the rising Sirius. You see how that works? So the first moon is that sliver crescent, which is the first day of the month. And in Hawaii, they've long held a lunar tradition where they align to the year at the time of the Pleiades, Makali'i. Makaliki is like the annual New Year, I guess I'll call it festival. Calibration might be a way to say it too. So when the Pleiades, as we know them, rise at sunset, right? That would also mean they're setting at sunrise, right? They're opposite the sun. To be like astronomically accurate, the Pleiades are not exactly on the ecliptic, and obviously they're not as bright as a full moon, so it doesn't quite work like all of that, right? But at the time when you see the Pleiades at sunset, which is it's in itself a thing, because obviously as the sun is setting, the sky's not dark enough even in the east to fully see stars, especially stars that aren't that bright, like the cluster, right? Regardless, this is the time of like the new year. But it's also not, because if you know any of the lunar calendar traditions, like the Chinese calendar, the Babylonian, which became the Akkadian, which became the Hebrew calendar, you have a count of 12 months, right? 12 experiences of moon moving through her waxing and waning phases as her smile grows to full O and then shrinks as she goes into her trial by fire every month, right? And it's that new moon, not the moon sun conjunction, but the visible young moon after sunset that begins the month, right? Well, 12 of those lunations or months is like 354 days. A year, this is not, right? And so many of you just experienced this in the 7 hours of eclipse class at the School of Astrology Constellations. I should just share again that I have started a wonderful new community at the School of Astrology called Constellations. I'm going to put a link for you here in the chat. Though I know many of you are already in, many of you have already aligned your star with ours. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to see where we're going to go. This week, there'll be 3 things I can't even attend. It's going to just be amazing and organic and community oriented. So on Friday, by the way, for those of you in Constellations, I'll be sending out an email about this soon. But there was already an announcement. Hopefully you got an email if you figured out how to do the website stuff yet. We'll be sharing more about how to do that down the road. It can be tricky to navigate. Carolyn Link is going to be leading 2 prenatal eclipse kind of study group, research groups, chart play on Friday for different time zones. And then Alyssa Luna is going to be doing an embodied astrology practice embodying Aries on Sunday. So you'll hear more about that soon. If you want to hear more, you can join Constellations right now at like the first Voyager's price, $16 a month. Literally go pay $16 and you'll have immediate access to 7 hours of eclipse chart with class with live chart reading, and I don't know where I'm probably about 10 hours of backyard astronomy videos now that will help you learn to see the zodiac in the sky with your eyeballs. All right. And you'll get to learn more and more things like this about how to keep star time. So we do this with the moon if we want to align our moons to the heavenly happenings, but the issue again is 12 moons, 12 lunations is like 354 days. This is not a year. And if you like things like food, like life, you better also keep the sun, the Earth sun days, right? So like in the Chinese calendar, for example, you may have seen that this year, like the New Year festivities, beginning, year of the dragon, if you will, were celebrated at like February 10th. That was the new moon. Not the moon sun conjunction, but the young moon, right? Like the day after. And specifically as seen in Beijing, though these days they just calculate it mathematically, of course. Because nobody's watching the sky anymore. Just turn on the lights. Sorry. Anyway, but the dragon year actually began on February 4th. Why? Because there's also a solar year. There's 24 stages of the year, which is the sun moving 15 degrees through the tropical zodiac, and they begin spring when the sun is at 15 degrees tropical Aquarius. They don't use those words for it, right? But that's how it corresponds to the 360-degree year called the tropical zodiac, which is the best solar calendar that ever was, is, and will be. Okay. So, Han and I think the last time we were here actually was Makaliki. It was like the New Year festival, and they were teaching kids in the school here, which is awesome. And they just celebrated on November 7th, which is like the Gregorian calendar day when the sun is in the degree of the zodiac opposite the Pleiades. And you know what I'm saying, that's not actually true, because the Pleiades right now mark the gateway between tropical Taurus and Gemini, right? So the sun ingresses opposite to that point, Sagittarius, on what, like November 20 something? So you know what? It's November 17th, not November 7th. There we go. But anyway, it shouldn't be then. That's the time of the year when you need to calibrate. But you need to do this with the moon, like Nadine wrote in chat here. Hebrew holidays start at sunset. Yeah, so do any tradition. Sorry to laugh at that. Like, yes, absolutely, right? And when's the new year? In the autumn. Why? That's the sunset of the year. And why sunset? Because that's when you see the young moon. And so that's when months begin. So that's when days of the months begin. So days begin at sunset. Okay. And so, yes, like this November 17th-ish, if you're into that whole Gregorian trip, when the sun is opposite the Pleiades, but you don't do it on that day. You look for the new moon, the Hilo moon, around that time to be the first day of the first month of the year. Okay, there's so much more to say about that. It gets way too detailed. That's stuff for like course, not for just a Wednesday weekly. And it's time for me to go be that stag that's not just hanging out with the fellas. Sorry, ladies, the fellowship, the community, the constellations, but it's hanging out with the family. So I'm about to go do that. Next time you'll see me, I'll be redder. Nice to see you. Thanks for spending some time with me here. For those of you who are waiting for me to be live at 11 a.m. and maybe even in other places, thanks also for dealing with my retrograde technical difficulties. If you like this video, please give the video a like. I see a bunch of people are watching right now and there's no likes. So what if everybody just like hit the like button right now? What do you think that would do to my heart? Do you want to see it happen like live? Everybody just hit the like button and watch what happens to my heart space. If you feel that you have friends that might enjoy content like this, it can even deal with the ranty bits, please share this video around. I would sure appreciate that. That'd be a really wonderful thing you could do to support my work. I will be live here if I can sort it out with the ones and O's every Wednesday, Miracles, every Mercury's Day, 11 a.m. Pacific, which meant this morning at 8:11 a.m. Hawaii time. I think we should end here with this thing once again. So anyway, please support the work, like the video, share it around, and come check out constellations. You can link there from GeminiBrett.com, from GeminiBrett.com/links, or you can use all your keyboard keys. GeminiBrett.com/constellations will take you right there to learn more about the new wonderful community at the School of Earth Astrology, where you and I can learn so much together about the miracles of the living sky and the marriage of heaven and earth. See you in space, friends.